You're listening to the Strange Oddities Podcast. Please welcome your host, Matthew J. Haas. This is your podcast for strange things.
All right, everybody. Welcome to another exciting episode of the Strange Oddities Podcast. I'm your host, Matthew J. Haas. As always, guys, the start of every show, I always start with the same stuff, get the boring things out of the way, so this way I can introduce this amazing guest that we have. Because you just, again, on the Strange Oddities Podcast, you never know who's going to come by as a guest on the Strange Oddities Podcast. You just never know who's going to drop in. So I'm going to give this fellow a nice warm welcome. But first, we're going to get that, boring stuff out of the way. Guys, we have a website. It's strangeodditiespodcast.wordpress.com. I do have an email if you'd like to make a comment or talk about any of the things that we talked about on the show. It's strangeodditiespodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook if you haven't. Guys, all the info about the podcast, all of our guest info and upcoming guests that we have scheduled on the show is listed on Facebook. So that's where you want to be to follow all the news and announcements for Strange Oddities Podcast. You can chat with us during the show, either on Facebook or YouTube. Please subscribe on our YouTube channel if you haven't already. We're almost at 100 subscribers. I want to thank all you subscribers for subscribing. I appreciate that. So I'm going to go ahead and get this awesome gentleman in here because we got a really cool topic for this week. I'm a huge fan of the Mothman, and I know a lot of people are. He's a mysterious figure or creature that's been sighted in a few states. So we're going to talk about that throughout the show. We have Mr. Tobias Wayland here. He wrote a book about the Lake Michigan Mothman sightings. He's also made an appearance on Expedition X. He, had the opportunity to, greet those guys about the Mothman sightings in Chicago, in the Chicago area. I know they asked about his expertise on the Mothman. And Tobias, you also have a team that works with you. You do investigations with the Mothman and stuff. Tobias, welcome on the show. I appreciate you, doing the Strange Oddities Podcast. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this. And you're right. It hasn't just been me, of course, investigating these sightings. Back in 2017. Really throughout the entirety of this investigation. Of course, my wife, Emily, who's my partner in the Singular Fortean Society, has been with me, every step of the way. And then, of course, people like Lon Strickler from Phantoms and Monsters and Manuel Navarrete over at UFO Clearinghouse have certainly, done a lot of work as far as receiving and investigating reports.
Very cool. Yeah. Well, before we get into the topic of the Mothman, Tobias, how about maybe give our listeners a little brief background, of how you got to this point in your investigative career? I guess you've also done work for MUFON, I believe, and with your there's a little bio here next to your book that over the years you've worked as in the field for MUFON. And again, you mentioned the Singular Fortean Society, who you're one of the main editors and writers for them.
Yeah, so I actually got started as an investigator by being a field investigator for the Mutual UFO Network. Oh boy, how long ago was that now? I'm gonna make
by, right?
Yeah, seriously. Like everything feels like it was like between 3 and 5 years ago, but it was really like probably 14 years ago. I think I started out as a field investigator for MUFON, here in Wisconsin, and I would investigate UFO cases. There was a state director and some assistant state directors, and you'd basically be given these UFO sighting cases as they were submitted to MUFON, and it's about what you would expect, contacting witnesses, doing on-site investigation when possible, a lot of research and stuff like that. I think it was a really great way to sort of learn the foundational methods behind like conducting a good, solid, thorough investigation. And so, there's the cat behind me.
That's okay. You may see one or two behind us.
Nice. So I worked as a field investigator for MUFON for several years. I think it was about 5 years. And, at a certain point, I just kind of decided that I wanted to do my own thing. I think MUFON was a great learning experience overall. I found it to be a little restrictive as far as the types of things I was investigating and sort of, what I was allowed to do as far as like the investigations were concerned. And so I left to kind of do my own thing. I met Emily in 2015, and on our first date, actually, because at that point, I was very upfront. Like, I'm a weird guy. I'm into some weird stuff. Like I like UFOs and cryptids and ghosts and psychic stuff. And she surprised me. She told me about this Fortean phenomenon that I had never heard of. It's called the Paulding light. It's up in the UP in Paulding, Michigan. And it's this ghost light up there, and I'd never heard of it, And so she's telling me about something I'd never heard of in the Fortean realm, and I was just like, well, clearly this is fate. This is the woman for me, right?
Yeah, totally.
And so, long story short, we decided to start the Singular Fortean Society, and be able to investigate things our way. Present the information to people, because that was one of my issues with MUFON is, you weren't allowed to make the data freely available to everybody, which I had a huge issue with. I think that, we have a responsibility to make this stuff available to people, if they want it. And so that's one of the things that we do with the Singular Fortean Society. Right. Basically cover paranormal topics journalistically. Write news articles about them, and get it out there, so people can look at the information objectively and sort of make up their own minds. But at least they have the information, and they have it from somebody, who's taking it seriously, which of course is a huge problem, in the mainstream media.
Right. Well, can I, if I can add, doesn't MUFON have like a database or like a way of where you guys submit all of your data and findings of throughout your investigations that you do for them? Wouldn't it like be something maybe for them to think about in the future, where people can publicly access that?
Oh, that would be great. Yeah, I mean, that would be a fantastic resource. They have all of, because you're absolutely right. So basically how it works is they have this case management system, and everything that is reported to them goes into CMS, and when you're investigating something, you're investigating out of CMS basically. And then, you update it with your report, once the investigation is complete. And if that was publicly, just available to everybody, that'd be a real service, frankly. I don't know why they don't do that.
Right.
But I guess that's their business. That's just not how I wanted to do business. So.
Right. No, I get you. Yeah. Yeah. No, totally. So you went your own way, and you now you get involved in other investigations. What got you started, particularly over the Mothman? What got you to, all right, this needs further research into? And I know there's been a lot of particular sightings recently in that area where you are, Lake Michigan, and also the Chicago area, which is why you also made a TV appearance on Expedition X. There was a major sighting on one of the tallest buildings in Chicago, and there was a guy with a video. I remember the episode. Just to go over my own homework here when I had my guests on. But I remember the thing flying overhead, and it was a pretty large being or figure. And, you can argue maybe a very large bird, but there's very rare large birds, I think, in that area, right?
Well, there actually are some. We have sandhill cranes are one, but I don't think that has much to do with it, with any of the Lake Michigan Mothman sightings. But there's a similar bird actually called a great blue heron, and great blue herons are about 4 feet tall, and they can have wingspans, up to like 7 feet. They're often described as flying dinosaurs because that's kind of what they look like. So when they're flying, they have these big long necks like cranes do. But when herons fly, they tend to tuck their head back, so you can't really see their neck. They kind of tuck their head back into their shoulders, and so you get this profile of something that can look like a sort of skinny humanoid with this huge wingspan. And so, using the Pilsen sighting as an example of that,
sure.
I spoke to Kelly myself, multiple times. He's a great guy and an excellent witness, honestly. Honestly, maybe just for everybody listening, I'll just go through the Pilsen sighting. So, in May of 2018, a man was bicycling to work in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago. And, he had a GoPro camera on his bicycle helmet. So he was recording everything like he did pretty much every day while he was bicycling to work. And on his way, he noticed a man and woman that appeared to be looking at something in the sky. They're standing on a street corner. The man's like pointing at something. And he looks up and he sees what he later described to me as either a giant bat or a man in a wingsuit. And, he sees this thing and he's like, wow, what the hell is that? And he realizes, of course, that he has this camera on his bicycle helmet. So he decides he's going to follow this thing around and record as much footage of it as he could. And he totally did. And it was great, honestly. And so I spoke to him later and he related all of that info to me, and he was very forthright, frankly. Like, he very much believed that he saw what he said he saw. And he didn't try to hide anything. And he was more than willing to provide us with all of the footage. He sent us the SD card that from his camera and everything. You couldn't ask for a better witness than this guy, honestly.
Sure.
And, we isolated some stills from the footage, with his help and everything. And, when you blow it up, I mean, I hated to say it, but it really looks like the silhouette of a large bird. I would guess a great blue heron. It's impossible to say, because again, it's just a silhouette of something flying,
right,
far away. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely what it looked like. But again, like, he wasn't lying or anything.
Right.
And it was interesting too, because when I spoke to him after that, and I was like, hey, can you look at some pictures of birds, so I sent him some pictures of birds and was like, hey, it just different kinds. Of course, I had some great blue heron stuff in there too. And I was like, well, you just look at these and see if anything, is even remotely similar. Right. And sure enough, like the great blue heron was the most similar. And at that point, he started to sort of come around. I was like, well, maybe that is what I saw. I don't really know. And in this part, I will never forget. And then he was like, he apologized. He was like, hey, I'm really sorry, if this was just a bird. And I was like, no, you have no idea like how much you have helped me here. Yeah, sure. I mean, seriously, because if it wasn't for that Pilsen footage, like that literally was able, or that was what allowed me to create this whole profile for a bunch of these sightings to kind of like separate the wheat from the chaff, because really when you look at these sightings as a whole, like there's two different profiles, really. Like you've got the daytime sightings like Kelly's, like where you're basically talking about something seen during the day, flying, relatively high, backlit by the sun. There's none of the associated like high strangeness or any paranormal phenomena or anything happening. It's literally just some huge weird thing that maybe the person seeing it has never seen before. And so, after doing some research on my own and seeing sort of like how the heron population in that area had exploded due to things like climate change and destruction of wetland habitats and such. And then, combining that with what I had learned from his footage and his experience and everything, suddenly I was able to say, okay, well, we have a bunch of these sightings that I really couldn't make sense of before because they weren't like the really weird sightings. But now I have I have a bunch of circumstantial evidence that is really, really strong, pointing towards an explanation for these sightings. So at least we have that,
Right.
So yeah, it was a huge help, honestly.
Sure. Like you said, like how often do you have, an eyewitness that brings you all that evidence to the plate? Because let's face it, a lot of the sightings and like videos and pictures are either fuzzy or they don't have the original files. And you have to like really do your research. And it's hard to when they don't have the original files or, those hard pieces of evidence to present with, to you, the interviewer.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right. I mean, it was an absolute gift, like wrapped up and delivered right into my lap. Like it was just great. So
yeah. And if the fans haven't watched it yet, guys, watch Expedition X. I believe it's season 2 of Expedition X, correct?
No, it's the very first episode ever. Actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. No, it was which is funny because I remember when I did that show, like they didn't know what it was going to be called, and like I had no idea. I didn't find out like what it was going to be called or when, I was even going to be on until like it was like the day before or so. Like it was real soon, like just before it aired or something.
Right.
But yeah, no, it is because they did an episode on Mothman right away, and so they went out to Point Pleasant, and then they wanted to come into Chicago and film there too. So I got to be a part of that.
Right. So I do have just to kind of revert back a little bit, if you don't mind, we'll take a little bit step back into the UFO thing. I do have a question in the chat from Gonyak Paranormal. It says, do you think that UFO investigations intertwine with spirit investigation? In other words, do you think that sometimes, not all the time, could it be something other than aliens?
Yeah, I mean that's a really good question, actually, and the short answer to that is yes. And I guess the longer answer would be, there are a number of aspects of these phenomena that are mirrored from case to case. For instance, you can look at nighttime visitations, right? So I've spoken to witnesses who, for instance, I had one witness some while back named Bet Dobson, and Bet told me about an experience with a flying humanoid she had back in the 1980s. But prior to that experience, she had been in bed one night and had seen this strange creature, she said, poke its head around the door frame for her bedroom, and she had also seen this strange UFO outside of her window, and she had basically had a bunch of different experiences that just taken together, might lead you to believe that she's dealing with some sort of physical craft and the associated, creating things with that craft. But I've also had people who, will talk about, say, nighttime visitations where they wake up and they're visited by what appears to be like a shadow person. And the phenomena that they experience would be more typical of a haunting with electrical appliances, going haywire and seeing, strange balls of light and things floating around. And it's so bizarre because you have these commonalities. Well, heck, even things like poltergeist phenomena and,
Sure.
and balls of light. I mean, people report that as associated with anything from alien abduction to UFO sightings to hauntings to even some cryptid sightings. I've had people who have seen, a flying humanoid out in, actually, there was one lady out in Maryland. She and her son saw this flying humanoid on their way home one night. And immediately after their sighting, for some time after their sighting, they had this radio that they had never had any problems with before, ever, suddenly started to turn itself on at seemingly random intervals. And there was no obvious explanation for it. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't want to digress too much, I guess, but
Right.
the answer to that question is, yeah, absolutely. These cases have so much in common, from the weird nighttime visitation, aspect where it doesn't seem to matter what kind of monster or alien or spirit or whatever you're dealing with. They all seem to like to visit people in bed for some reason.
Right.
And then, all of the different aspects of paranormal activity that you find with them as well, like it's just across the board.
Yeah, totally. And also to further add to that question to Ganya, let's say, for example, Skinwalker Ranch. There's a lot of weird phenomena that happens on Skinwalker Ranch and the property, and especially those who are that live on the property. There's a couple of houses that have this weird activity, and it seems to be associated with the area. And they don't, like, they see weird things and stuff, but they don't necessarily say it's ghosts or paranormal stuff. But
Right.
A lot of that with Skinwalker Ranch, obviously it all points to some kind of UFO activity, because a lot of that gets reported that with Skinwalker Ranch. But anyway, what's your thoughts about that? Because that's seems to be the common theme with that.
Well, I think that what you've kind of touched on there is how I like to approach these topics, and that is, I don't like to put too much narrative on it. I really don't, because the fact is, we don't know what a UFO is. We don't know what cryptids are. We don't know what causes hauntings. People certainly have beliefs. Yeah. And some of those beliefs are supported by evidence to a greater or lesser degree. But fundamentally, we really, really, really just don't have any idea. And so when I'm investigating something, what I try to focus on is the phenomena itself. So, if somebody says, hey, I saw this strange ball of light, or I saw these weird lights in the sky, or I saw this weird creature, without putting too many labels on it, unless that helps add context, which it certainly can. So it's not like I won't call something a Bigfoot or Mothman or whatever else. Yeah. But as far as applying too much narrative, sort of trying to fill in gaps in the information with knowledge that we simply don't have, I really, really try hard to avoid that. And I think that's what you see out of places like Skinwalker Ranch. It has all of this weird stuff happening, but that's not really unusual to me. Like, the fact is, most of the cases I investigate have some mixture of that kind of phenomena. When I always make sure to ask witnesses, for instance, like towards the end of their interview, always make sure to ask them, have you had any other paranormal experiences either before or since, like the one you're telling me about now? And more than half the time you'll get people saying, oh, well, yeah, sure, I mean, I don't know if it's related, but I've had this or that also happen to me. And so this stuff doesn't seem to happen in a vacuum, at all. I think when you honestly investigate it, you'll find that that a lot of it seems to happen, if not simultaneously, within relatively close proximity.
Right, right. And, to put further emphasis on that, like as far as the Mothman is concerned, there's been eyewitnesses that have claimed paranormal stuff that have occurred with their sighting. And, some of these witnesses, like the one gentleman kind of like went a little crazy about his, so-called experiences that he's had. And, they made the movie, Mothman Prophecies, and that was based off of some of that. I don't know how true to the movie that was, or to those incidences, but again, that's Hollywood. But what led you up to investigating the Mothman?
Oh, sure. So, as far as this particular flap of sightings, well, strangely enough, it was because of MUFON, actually. Back in spring of 2017, a trio of sighting reports came through the MUFON CMS. And, MUFON published an article about them, and I had seen somebody share it. And so I looked into it, and I was like, well, I think this is something that our readers at the Singular Fortean Society would be interested in. And so I just covered like their press release about it. And, I didn't really think anything was going to come of it, honestly. They were relatively weird sightings. Didn't seem like there had been a whole heck of a lot of follow-up or anything. So I was like, well, this will be a cool story. I think people will enjoy it, and that'll probably just be the end of it. But of course, that's not what happened.
Right.
Very soon after that, I started seeing reports coming into Phantoms and Monsters and UFO Clearinghouse. And so, I thought, well, I wouldn't be covering this story very well if I didn't reach out to those guys and see if I could interview them. And so I did. I interviewed them separately. I interviewed, Lon and Manuel, and they were both very forthright about the reports they had been receiving and sort of what had gone into investigating them so far. And it wasn't too long after that, actually, that, because Emily and I were in the area. We're only about 2 hours north of Chicago. Lon was like, hey, why don't you, help investigate these sightings? He'd been introduced through mutual friends. And so, that's really how I got started with it. And it wasn't too long after that before, we were receiving our own sightings. People see an article that we publish and they'll reach out to us directly. And so, even as far back as 2017, when we had been only really recently involved with the sighting investigation, we had begun receiving our own reports.
Right. How many interviews have you done, or as far as eyewitnesses, since your initial start of investigating the Mothman? Has there been quite a few cases?
I've done, actually, if I look here, I'll try to give you a pretty accurate number. I have my timeline up here, so
Cool.
let me take a look. I've done roughly about 32 witness interviews personally. Wow.
And is that like your particular area, or Chicago and Wisconsin combined, or
both? Yeah. So it'll, we do obviously get reports from around where we are. We literally just investigated one like maybe 20 minutes away towards the end of November here. But it'll be reports from actually Indiana, Illinois and Wisconsin as well. That's why I always really insisted on that, because everybody wants to make it about Chicago, because
Sure.
I get it, it's Chicago. It's the third largest city in the nation. It's a big deal. But, we've got a lot of reports, very interesting, credible reports from other states bordering Lake Michigan. And so instead of making it all about Chicago, I try to remind people there's really nothing special about Chicago in and of itself, other than a lot of people live there. Yeah. There's lots of other really interesting reports, that are coming from other areas. And it's probably more just this area of the country rather than, Mothman really loves the Bears or something.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Would you say that there are more or less in Chicago or Wisconsin or vice versa, or roughly around the same?
well, we have received more reports from Chicago than anywhere else, and that makes a certain amount of sense. When you're talking about that kind of population density, I would expect to receive more reports. What I will say, though, is in my personal opinion, none of the best reports came from Chicago. Like, we've certainly got the most from there, but to my mind, the most interesting and best investigated have come from outside of Chicago.
Okay, cool. We have a couple more questions in the chat. What is your opinion? I knew this question would come up eventually because we can wrap so many theories around the Mothman, but
I love it. I love talking about it.
yeah, no, it's cool. And I appreciate the people in the chat, throwing questions out there too. So again, this is from Ganyak Paranormal. What is your opinion on what the Mothman could be? Is it like a Bigfoot? And to add to that question, there's another question similar from Ron Iacovetti. Do you think, is it possible that the Mothman creature is an interdimensional being, theoretically, or in any way connected to possibly like the jinn?
I mean, all of that's possible. Like literally anything's possible at this point. I will say, in my personal opinion, I find it difficult to believe that the Mothman would be anything that we would recognize as a mundane biological creature. And I think I have some pretty compelling reasons for thinking that. For instance, if you look at the normal description of this creature, you're talking about something people describe as being anywhere between 6 to 8 feet tall, with a wingspan between 12 and 15 feet, right? There's no way something like that should be able to get off the ground. Given our understanding of biological flight mechanisms, there's just no way it shouldn't be able to fly. But here we are, people see it, and people see it in flight, and then you look at the associated high strangeness, the UFO sightings in the same areas, often like the exact same area, like literally just right above where they had seen it some other time. Like you look at all that stuff, you look at the weird paranormal activity that people will report associated with it, often following one of their sightings or directly preceding it. And so all of that stuff to me adds up to something much stranger than just in undiscovered animal species. Even in the interactions themselves, you'll often have people describing this almost supernatural terror or this feeling of like palpable evil. You'll have people talking about, really sort of feeling this almost psychic connection where they feel like it's just staring into their soul, for lack of a better word.
Kind of like the movie, The Mothman Prophecies. That's what that guy was experiencing somewhat.
I think similar, yeah. And of course the movie is based on the Mothman Prophecies book by John Keel.
Right.
And so, if anybody has read that, or if you haven't read it, I really recommend it. It's a great book. But you can see a lot of you can see a lot of similarities between what people were describing, back in the 60s in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and what people are describing, all around Lake Michigan since at least 2017. Although the longer this has been going on, the more historical reports will come in. So the oldest report I have right now, I took probably, I think it was just last year, but this was from a guy, Gerald Therese, who said he had his sighting all the way back in 1957.
Oh wow! I didn't realize it went that far. Yeah.
Right. I mean, if that's accurate, then wow, like that certainly turns everything on its head. That would be the oldest Mothman sighting anywhere that has been recorded so far.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. Another question we have from S. May in the chat. Do you know of any credible photos of the O'Hare area sightings?
Of the O'Hare area sightings? No, actually. There have been no credible photos. There are very few photos, period, honestly. And incredible photos are even rarer, really. And so, I haven't seen anything like that in the way of evidence come out of O'Hare. There's been some difficulties surrounding like that particular area of investigation. I myself have only spoken to one witness from the O'Hare area personally. And I've had limited email contact with two others. And so when it comes to O'Hare, and again, I know those are very popular sightings and people are very interested in them. But they haven't had the same level of corroboration and confirmation and witness contact that we've had in other sightings. And so that's the biggest detriment, frankly, to those O'Hare sightings, is for a variety of reasons. They're just not as compelling as others, not because the stories themselves aren't interesting. Of course they are. They're very interesting, but because of, all of the sort of investigative stuff that you want to see, when you're investigating something, as far as like convincing yourself. I have to convince myself before I can even start to convince somebody else.
Yeah.
Like a lot of that stuff is missing from those sightings, which to a certain extent I understand. Like the common refrain from a lot of the witnesses who claim to actually work at O'Hare is that they're worried about their career. If they say they're a pilot or they work in the air traffic control tower or something, like they say they're worried because they'll be, grounded for mental health reasons or something. And that certainly might be true. But, before I'm willing to personally put my credibility on the line,
right,
for, those sightings, I need something more than we've been given so far.
Right. But, I do want to ask you, speaking of which, to add further to what you're just talking about, what stands out for you when you interview an eyewitness? Like, what are some of the things that you reach for that makes it what you may think could be a genuine case?
Sure. Well, honestly, like one of the biggest things is just having somebody willing to speak to you directly in the first place. Now, often, if somebody is trying to hoax something, they're not going to want to talk to you directly.
Right.
It's a lot easier to hoax something through a series of emails or just a one-off story or something. Like you just send some investigator your creepypasta, excuse me, and hope that they buy it. And that's what usually happens as far as hoaxes are concerned. So literally just somebody being willing to sit down, even if it's just over the phone, and speak to me directly and give me everything I need to verify their identity so I know who they are. I don't necessarily have to tell the whole world who they are, but I need to know personally.
Right.
That right there is a huge step towards their credibility, as far as I'm concerned. And then from there, it's all about getting their story without encouraging any embellishment or leading them or anything. So, really what I'll normally do is I'll start by asking for just simple info, like, okay, what was the date? What time did you see this thing? Where were you? Just simple stuff like that. And then assuming they have all of that info, then, okay, well, what happened? And, I'll interrupt them sometimes with other questions and stuff. But generally speaking, I really just want to hear their experience in their own words. And then if I have any questions, like I need more detail or something, I can ask them. But what's really important to me is getting as much good detail as I can that I'm able to corroborate. So again, you start with identifying the witness. You have to know who they are. And then from there, you can move on to verifying the details of their story that, we're capable of actually confirming. So for instance, like if I ask somebody the time and date and location, and they might give me details about, say, what the weather was like that night. Well, I can check that. You can go to Weather Underground and check historical weather data very, very easily.
Right.
I can confirm all of the geographic details. If they tell me, I was in such and such a spot, and it was pitch black. Well, I mean, I can go there personally and verify that. Or, if it's across the country or something, I can hop on Google Maps and go, well, there's 4 streetlights within 30 feet of your sighting. So it probably wasn't pitch black. Now, like I said, that almost never happens, frankly, because by the time you get to actually speaking with somebody directly, those are the people who really honestly experienced something. Whether or not that was paranormal, that's arguable. There are certainly cases where I think it was, but everybody's entitled to their own opinion as far as that's concerned. But yeah, that's really what I look for. Just having real people that I can really talk to about this stuff.
One-on-one.
Convincing. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. We got some more. We have, like, the chat is flooding with questions because Mothman's a big topic here on the Strange Oddities podcast tonight. Guys, real quick, if you're tuning in late, I'm with Tobias Wayland. He's a, pretty much was a MUFON investigator who kind of went into his own to research further into the Mothman sighting in his area. They take cases on their own, and, he's got a team that he works with, and he's also got a book, the Lake Michigan Mothman, which, guys, you can get on Amazon. We'll talk about some of the places people can get your book. But so a couple more questions in the chat. The same biological constraints that aerodynamics explain regarding wing to mass ratio, if it was infallible physical law, it would have bumblebees grounded worldwide. LOL. Yeah, pretty funny. And another question from Shannon Esme in the chat: what is your own personal most memorable or powerful experience?
About my own personal experience. Well, I've had a few in my life, but I'll tell you, there's one that really, really sticks out to me. So I was in my early 20s, and I lived at my parents' house at the time, and I had woken up one night, and this is in the suburbs. This is Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. It's maybe 20 miles north of Madison, and so it was not completely dark. There's sort of that ambient light coming in through the window curtains from the suburbs. And so, I wake up one night and I can move, it's not sleep paralysis or anything. I can move around, and I look over and my eyes adjust, and sort of in the ambient light of my room, I see this figure standing next to my bed, and it looks to be just like roughly man-shaped, I guess just like a 6 foot tall man, right? Mm. And I realized pretty quickly that I've got a weird perspective on this thing, because from my point of view, I'm looking over and I'm seeing this shadow being or whatever. Like my head is looking right into its chest, and I'm like, well, that's not right, because if I'm lying on my bed, I should be looking, more like thigh level or waist level or something, right? Right. And I realized then that I have to be floating several feet above my bed. And so again, like picture it, I'm sitting there or lying down, really. I'm in a supine position. And I wake up and I look around like, what is going on? And I turn over like this. I just turn my head to the left and I see this thing. And, again, I could move if I wanted to. I really decided in that moment that it probably wasn't a great idea to do that because I had this feeling like I was interrupting something. Like, I don't know what was going on before I woke up, but I probably wasn't supposed to be awake for this. So I didn't do anything. I just looked at this thing and just, I'm just staring and in sort of disbelief, like, what the hell is this? And I'll never forget this. It reaches its hand out, right? It reaches its hand out and puts it on my chest, like almost comfortingly. And I'm lowered back down to my bed and it just vanishes. Like that just disappears. And so I'm like lying there awake in my bed then, like, on top of my covers, actually. That's another detail I'll never forget. Like on top of my comforter that was like, up near the pillow underneath me.
Wow.
And just like, well, what the hell was that, right?
Yeah.
And it's gone, so there's nothing I can do. It's not worth waking my parents up about because what the hell are they going to do?
Right.
So I just kind of lied there for a while, and that was it. And eventually, I was just like, okay, I mean, that happened, and I went back to sleep.
Wow. Yeah. Well, being that the hand was on your chest and almost gave you a kind of a comfort feeling, do you think maybe it was like a spiritual loved one maybe visiting you at the time, or?
I don't know. Maybe. I guess it could have been a lot of things. Like I said, I really had the distinct feeling that sort of like I was interrupting something because, if it was somebody visiting me, like why the floating?
Almost sounds like astral projection almost.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
Honestly, the whole thing was bizarre. And that's kind of the reason where or why, when I'm investigating stuff, like there are several different narratives like I could apply to that situation, that experience, based on different beliefs. But I don't know that any of them were true. I don't know what the hell it was. Some people might have associated that with alien abduction. So other people are going to associate it with some sort of spiritual manifestation. Other people might have even weirder explanations, and none of us have any idea.
Right. Yeah. No, it's really good and safe to say we just don't know because we really don't. But so as far as the Mothman is concerned, when you investigate cases and reports of eyewitnesses that say they've seen something, are you and your wife or your team ever maybe nervous or concerned about you guys having possibly a negative experience, or having, if let's say hypothetically or theoretically, if the Mothman exists and it is something of paranormal phenomena that could, interact with you, in your thoughts, have you ever been concerned about things happening to you guys?
I haven't been really. Most of my concerns on an investigation, because you find yourself in a lot of different places very late at night. So most of my concerns on an investigation have to do with the human aspect.
Sure.
As far as safety. Yeah, right. I don't want to get, rolled by a meth head or something. And so those are most of the safety concerns that I have on any particular investigation. As far as dealing with some of the negative paranormal aspects, that's again, it's not something I'm super concerned about. I've been dealing with stuff like this on a personal level my entire life, and I haven't been hurt yet. And so I guess I kind of figured if something was going to physically harm me, it would have by now. And I've certainly picked up some tricks along the way as far as sort of defending myself in a way that is appropriate for the paranormal. So there are, you can call it magic if you want, or spiritual or whatever, but there are some different, sort of uses of consciousness, I think, that can allow one to better protect themselves and sort of prevent things like that from intruding too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get into your book a little bit. So what got you to write the book? What got you started into doing this book?
Sure. So as far as the Lake Michigan Mothman is concerned, we had been covering it by the time we started the book, which would have been like midway through 2019. By the time we started the book, we'd been covering the case for well over 2 years. And because of its relative popularity on the internet, I love how much interest people have had in these sightings. Like, I think that's absolutely fantastic, because they are very, very interesting. And I think there's really something there, if people are really willing to research and dig into it. But of course, the internet being the internet, I was seeing a lot of misinformation, frankly. Right. And, I thought, well, yeah, I could try to argue with literally every single person on the internet that I see who is spreading misinformation about these sightings or the investigation or anything else. But I age like 10 years every time I try. So I just should get it all out. Everything that went into the investigation up to the time that the book was written, all of the sightings up to that point, like everything, just get it into a book, have it all laid out. And then that's something that I could point to and be like, look, I've addressed that. It's in the book. As far as anything you've heard on the internet, like I said, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So now it's all laid out in a easy to digest way that people can just pick up and really find out what actually went into all of this.
Sure. Well, where can people find your book as far as if they were interested in buying Tobias's book, The Lake Michigan Mothman?
Sure. So there are a couple of different ways. It is on Amazon. A lot of people love using Amazon. I use Amazon. It's very convenient. If the one thing you can't get on Amazon, though, is a signed copy. If you want a signed copy, you can get those through our website. And the URL for the website is Singular Fortean. So singularfortean.com. So SINGULARFORTEAN. So Fortean is in Charles Fort. So if anybody doesn't know who that is, you should definitely look him up. He's the father of all modern paranormal investigation as far as sort of holistically investigating weird stuff. But anyway, so singularfortean.com/books, you could get an actual signed copy. Or, of course, Amazon is also available.
Cool. What are your plans for your future as far as any recent investigations or events or any goals that you have with the Mothman? Any theories that you'd like to lay down with all the information you've collected over the years or anything like that?
Sure. So I'm currently working on my second book. The working title so far is Strange Tales from the Singular Fortean Society. And in, I think, a lot of ways, it's sort of a spiritual successor to the Lake Michigan Mothman. It doesn't cover just flying humanoid sightings, although there are flying humanoid sightings in it. But we investigate a lot of things that aren't flying humanoid sightings. So it has all that stuff in it too. Everything from ghosts and hauntings to UFOs to shadow people, time distortions, just all of this other weird stuff. And it's really a way for me to examine the commonalities of all of these seemingly disparate phenomena and put it all together in sort of one book. And so that, that's what I'm personally working on now. As far as other stuff we have coming up, we are still planning on shooting on the trail of the Lake Michigan Mothman with Small Town Monsters.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, that's been delayed, of course, because of COVID. Illinois has some of the most rigid restrictions for COVID, which, hey, I mean, good for them. Like, you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, sure.
But it makes it difficult to shoot a documentary. Yeah. So, at a certain point, we're just going to have to go ahead and do it. I don't know when that's going to be, but that is still coming up. So like that'll be really cool. And then the only appearance we have so far in 2021, because I don't think there's going to be a lot of conferences even this year, maybe sort of in like the second half or starting in the summer or something. But right now, like, we have talked to Troy Taylor down in Alton, Illinois, and he is still planning on having Haunted America. So Emily and I will both be there. I'll be speaking there. And that's going to be, they moved the date. It's usually in June, but it's going to be end of July this year. So I think they're really trying to play it safe to make sure they can still have it and wait for the vaccine to get rolled out and all of that stuff. So that'll be really cool. Really looking forward to that. And I think that's about everything off the top of my head,
Yeah.
That's really exciting,
Yeah. I know. Like I said, COVID sucks. It really, has put a damper on a lot of things that we can or cannot do as of this year. Or, hopefully, like you said, in the second half of the year, things will get better, and we'll start getting some kind of normalcy out there, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
But well, as of like all the years you've been investigating, if you combine your MUFON experience and your Mothman experience together, have you put together your own personal theories as to what the Mothman could be?
Well, I certainly have some ideas. I guess I don't know that I have a real strong hypothesis for most, for most of the seemingly paranormal sighting reports. I will say that I do think that a good deal of these sightings and the interactions with these sightings seems to take place sort of on the level of consciousness, so you've got sort of this, I don't want to relate it to like a ghost or anything necessarily, but it seems to be something that is either capable of manipulating human consciousness or sort of reacting in a certain way. And so I think that's the real link between a lot of these phenomena, frankly. I think that whether or not they're exactly the same, maybe some of these phenomena are really only similar in the way that, say, like a wolf and a bear are similar. They're both mammals that live in forests, right? So, it's possible that, consciousness is sort of the commonality that you find, but you're still talking about, distinct phenomena or distinct entities that act within consciousness. So, but yeah, that's where I'm at with it right now. That's sort of like what I've been exploring recently.
Right. That's pretty consistent, I think, with everyone else's kind of theoretic, ideas about the Mothman. There's even some theories about him being, again, like what Gagnon brought up a little while ago in the chat, being interdimensional being, maybe on some kind of psychic level, and
sure.
It's, maybe telepathically, communicating with us as eyewitnesses, consciously, like you mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't rule that out for sure.
And then even some people, were saying that because whenever there's a sighting, something bad seems to occur, or not all the time, but at least in the past, like with the infamous bridge incident, with the bridge collapse, and there were sightings of him before that. So there's some people that think that, he's that's why he's got psychic abilities, because he's kind of predicting something that may occur.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, like that is a popular belief, like definitely. I haven't seen personally anything to convince me that is the case. Well, I mean, we can use Point Pleasant as an example. I think more than anything, John Keel is a fantastic storyteller, and I think that in many ways, the Silver Bridge was a convenient narrative ending to his book. And I get it, like that. It's nice to have a tidy narrative ending because people really like those.
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at the sightings overall, it doesn't really, the harbinger of doom angle, it doesn't really play out, honestly. Not even in Point Pleasant. I mean, the sightings didn't stop.
Right.
Like after the Silver Bridge collapse in December of 1967, the sightings continue. They continue to this day all along the Ohio River Valley. So It really seems like it was just a terrible coincidence. It was a huge tragedy and a terrible coincidence. And it's sort of been folded into the lore around the Mothman. But, there, like I said, there really isn't much strong evidence to support the idea that something bad is going to happen, related to Mothman sightings.
Right. And then, I mean, again, we could go on and on about theories and theories, same thing with like the paranormal, like we can talk paranormal shop, like,
totally.
But, and then some say it was a military experiment gone wrong, and it seems to kind of, I guess, hibernate like within like military installations that no longer exist, and that's why they investigate, those type places. And, there's so many theories out there.
True. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is. So you got to kind of choose your battles.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. Well, speaking of that TNT area in Point Pleasant, because I assume that's sort of what the connection is for people. There's the old like abandoned TNT depots outside of Point Pleasant, and that's where some of the initial sightings of Mothman were back in the 60s. And so I would guess from there, people sort of built onto that to have this association with other military sites. I've heard people speculate that because like that TNT area was an environmental disaster, by the way. Like the whole area was poisoned because of like all of the garbage from the TNT. So I've had people or seen people speculate, that it's, Mothman was some sort of mutant creature mutated by the poisonous chemicals, or, who knows. That seemed like probably a better origin for a comic book villain, but, it's who knows, honestly. Yeah. But there are a lot of theories.
Yeah. Have you ever been to the festival down south, or?
I haven't yet, actually. One of these days I definitely will. I know the Small Town Monsters crew gets down there a lot. And certainly, I'd have other friends that go annually. I think that was one of those things where we've sort of been planning on it, and then other stuff happens. And, of course, we were thinking about it very early last year, and we all saw how that turned out. So, maybe in 2022 or something, if it comes back, sure.
Yeah, it's on my bucket list. I wanted to go a couple of times, before last year, but it didn't pan out like the way I wanted. Hopefully, I mean, it's not, not that far from me really. So, it's a possibility in the near future for myself.
Nice.
I hear the festival is a really good time. A lot of interesting people that go down there. A lot of speakers, a lot of vendors. It's a big event for them. That town is really kind of based a lot of their tour and the tourism to kind of boost their economy over there a little bit.
Oh, it's a huge part of their entire town's economy at this point.
Yeah.
Well, if you've seen the Mothman Legacy, like the latest Small Town Monsters documentary, like they cover it pretty well.
Yeah.
But I mean, in a lot of ways, Mothman saved that town. I mean, after the Silver Bridge collapse, and like the industry in Point Pleasant, it took a huge hit. And so having that extra tourism, it's really helped them.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. But, well, we're getting to the bottom of the show. The questions from the listeners that were in the chat, I really appreciate everybody that threw really good questions out there. I hope I threw good questions to my
Nothing but good questions. They're all great.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you for being a guest on the Strange Oddities podcast. Again, can you just tell our listeners where they can get your book and, what your website is and, just real quick.
Definitely. Well, I mean, thanks for having me, of course, first of all. But then, also, if you're interested in the Lake Michigan Mothman, High Strangeness in the Midwest, it is available through Amazon. It's also available directly through the Singular Fortean Society website, singularfortean.com, which is where you would go if you wanted to get a signed copy. Of course, singularfortean.com is also where you can keep up on all of the latest paranormal news, investigations, and Singular Fortean Society community stuff. Also, you can find us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, basically everything you expect. If you're interested enough in the Singular Fortean Society and investigation that you want to be a part of it, you can always go to patreon.com/singularfortean and sign up.
Nice. And, well, again, thanks for being an awesome guest. If you don't mind, just stay on while I close out the show with my listeners. Sure. And I'll say goodbye, personally after everything's over.
Sounds good.
All right, great. So I'm just going to minimize you here and just tell our listeners that I am working on a guest for next week. I will announce that when that happens. I hope everybody enjoyed Mr. Tobias Wayland. Again, get his book. I hear really great things about the book. I plan on getting the book to add to my collection. I hope I get a signed copy as well. So I'm going to get it through his website. But guys, the Mothman, check out the Mothman Prophecies movie. It was really interesting. Like you said, it was based off of the book, it was based on the bridge that collapsed down there and, really interesting stuff to check out about the Mothman. Guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's show. I'm going to go ahead and play our exit here, and I hope you guys enjoyed everything tonight. You never know who's going to drop in on the Strange Oddities podcast. I'll announce our guest very soon for next week. I am working on Dave Schrader from Darkness Radio and the Holzer File. I will be announcing a date when Dave Schrader officially gives me the okay as to which date that we're going to, have Dave on the Strange Oddities podcast. So I'm excited to announce that. So as soon as I get more information, I'll be getting that out there for everybody. All right. So guys, have a great night and be well, be safe. And that's it. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. All right, guys. Have a great night.